Good
You
job.
touch your face, go wash your hands.
I touch my face so much through this thing, I might put a counter up in the bottom. Like how many times did Christina touch her face during this?
Hey, peace be with you. Welcome back to the Young Canadian Lutherans YouTube channel. My name is Christina. I am a young Canadian Lutheran, and today's video is part 2 of a 3-part mini-series of a sermon talkback with Pastor Karen Kuhnert. If you haven't seen the original sermon, it looks like this, and I will link the video down below. It's called Starting Holy Week 2020. And if you haven't seen part 1, we posted it 2 days ago on Monday, and it looks like this, and I will also link that down below. Other than that, let's get going, and I hope you enjoy the video.
Can I ask a question?
We could
Yeah,
just
I was
cut all
gonna
of
say,
that.
do you have some questions? So, Mom, you said, do you want to get in here?
No,
Nah,
it's good.
Okay, I'll be the cameraman. Woman. So, Mom, you said that you were a little hesitant to use that passage about Joshua and Moses.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Thank you. Yeah, all of those. So the problem with those passages is that they're conquest passages. So we can all get on board with the chosen people, and we align ourselves with the chosen people. We can all get on board with the chosen people leaving the place of their slavery. Like that just makes sense for 1,000 reasons. That is as relevant in our context as it has ever been in history. But the problem is they did not stay and could not stay in the wilderness of sin, as it is described in the scripture. They were going into the promised land, and the problem with that is that the promised land was already inhabited.
There were people.
So the location of the incoming people displaced other peoples. So in this particular case, the people that Moses was leading and Joshua then was the chief of battle, he was battling people who were already in the land. So in a way, that's why you needed the end passage of this particular sermon, because we're not about that anymore. We are more aware of the doctrine of discovery. We don't want to be about invasions and genocide and all of that. We have a bad history in that department. But it does allow us to say that agreement between the Canadian Council of Churches and the Canadian Interfaith Conversation Group, though that's Muslims, Jewish people, and Christian people all agreeing together that in this moment we're going to focus on what we hold in common. And those leaders together, we're all battling not a people, not a race, not an ethnicity, not a religion. We are all commonly battling COVID. And so with that in mind, I chose to use that story of Moses, which really only makes sense if you understand that it is a battling against narrative, and that the difficulty of the text and the historicity of the text, you got to just own that may or may not be historic. This may or may not be a narrative. This might be factual, but it might also just be a story told around the campfire that encouraged people to have God be your guide no matter what you're going through. We're Canadians. We can't be about invading people's space and genocide, and we can't be aligned with that, and we can't be aligned with anti-Jewish sentiments in this Holy Week, or anything that denigrates the Jewish people. We're not about that.
So, my dad, Peter, your husband, circulated the photo that inspired this sermon to our family via email, just to send out some encouragement around. And when I first saw it, I was like, this is fantastic, this is wonderful, how beautiful. And my first instinct as a Gen Z is, let's share it on social media. Gotta get that plug. So, but then I hesitated because this is a particularly tough time. Crisis is always a hard time for people of faith because it instills a sense of doubt and questioning in one's religious context, because if God is good and if God only does good things and if his angels were there to protect me then and my family and my loved ones, then why did my grandma just die of COVID?
Yeah.
Why are the Italians and the Spaniards and the people of China all suffering so vastly, and people all over this world if God is here to protect us? And so I hesitated to share it because I don't know if I have yet formulated in my life a great answer for why that happens. So during this sermon, a thought that crossed my mind was perhaps protection doesn't necessarily mean earthly protection. Ooh. Well, no one says that. No one knows what the plans for us are, and it's always hard to come to terms with this. And so in a time where people feel that maybe God's angels are not protecting them, are not protecting the people of this world, are that maybe they're feeling failed by God and by faith, what do you have to say to that?
Well, so having heard the sermon, what did you understand the word angels to mean?
So I have the added benefit of knowing both the writer of said sermon as well as the inspiration of the sermon. And one thing that Dad said actually was angels aren't always
Heavenly beings with wings?
Precisely. Heavenly beings with wings who manifest on earth as humans. So Dad had said that sometimes people in life are... Christina, do you want to help me out with this? Like he said something along the lines of not people in your lives being angels, but maybe descended upon by angels. I don't think that's quite what he said.
That angels are not necessarily like, I came from heaven and here are my wings and my halo and now everything's good and nothing will hurt you. But they can... So you said in the sermon it's God's presence among you.
So I think you have a couple of questions in there. One, I think you're asking how it can be that people can understand God is with you when your grandparent died, or when so many deaths are happening in Italy, when on the one hand we say that God is protecting us and yet people are still dying. Is that one of the questions? So in religious circles, that's called THEODICY. Where is God when bad things happen? Where is God specifically when bad things happen to good people? And all religions have a way of answering that question and dealing with that question, because that's a question of the human condition. So I think what I would say to you in this moment is that this sermon described at the end Dad's words that angels are the presence of God in this case. So I think what he said to you was it would not be on point to think of angels as winged creatures with feathers who are coming down and hovering around like a Hallmark card. But I hope you saw in this sermon that the presence that brings good news, the messengers of God's presence, the good news that is surrounding might be the presence of angels who come with face masks and ventilators, messengers of good news who walk into hospital wards when their own lives are at stake. that the presence of God is being brought by those who are on the front line at the grocery store, because that is actually the good news that hungry people need right now. In order to stay home, they need food. So it doesn't mean there aren't any heavenly beings surrounding us right now. That would be a mystery of God I couldn't speak to. But it would be a loss of a moment for us not to look and say, okay, we're not alone. A lot more is happening here than we easily understand. And I think that's what happens in times of crisis. That's what has happened in my life when there have been deaths, when we have gone through difficult times. When you are living through that difficult time, or you look back on it and you go, oh, I was in the presence of holiness and I didn't understand at the time. And I don't want to say too much more about that, because that's each person's journey to actually experience what grace feels like in your life and what the presence of God in different moments looks like. So in our faith tradition, we understand that when you are in crisis, when something horrible is happening to you, something that brings you grief or isn't fair, you can count on God to be right there with you in the midst of that horrible thing, because our God knows something about being in the middle of horrible things. Our God doesn't just stay off at a safe distance. Our God is face to face with us, battling difficult things.
Amen.
Yeah.
It also seems really hard to put your faith into that and be like,
Yeah.
I guess it's happening.
Yes. And in part, what I wanted to say to you is that we've been talking about virtual church, right? And the benefits of virtual church and digital accessibility to one another. But one of the best things about the church as we have done it, the old church, is that the old church repeatedly practices something called habitus. And habitus is the thing that you do repeatedly until you become the thing that you do.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with being innovative. There's nothing wrong with being creative. There's nothing wrong with us making church different or changing our words. But some of the things that we do repeatedly, we do because we become those things. So when we share the peace every week, we become peace sharers. And when we value sharing the peace every week, we become peace wrestlers. And when we wrestle with peace, then we become peacemakers. So if we were to not ever gather together and have to face deal with that yucky feeling inside when you have to wish somebody peace and you really don't want to wish them peace, you really want to say, I'm really bad. There's no distance between you. Habitus is becoming peacemakers out of being peacemakers. So being people of hope happens because of being people of hope. Living through Easter every year helps us live through this Easter this year. We are prepared by habitus.
By the habit that we form.
That's right. Habitus is a Latin word which means all this other stuff. But it means, for example, when I say to you Exodus, my one word means 19 years worth of stories.
Sure.
It means every time we've told the story or enacted the story. And so it means every time somebody is moving from a place where they are not safe to a place where they have hope and a better future. Exodus means all of those things. You're enacting that every year in Lent and Easter is habitus.
That makes sense.
So I was thinking this morning when we were talking about this, Pharaoh, Oh, yeah.
Oh, baby, let my people go. Yes.
Yeah,
you betcha.
Right? So this is the story of the Exodus. So if I say it to you, Pharaoh,
Beep, beep.
beep, beep, you get that, right? But if I say to you, go down, Moses, way down to Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. What does that mean to you?
Beep, beep.
It means the same thing, right?
Sure.
So today you've heard that same story, leaving Pharaoh on the path to a promised land of hope. Habitus.
Stay with me, remain here with me.
Stay with me. When I sing to you, stay with me, remain here with me, don't you automatically move to the garden? Don't you think in your mind's eye of all of the Good Fridays when we've done those readings at Maranatha and we walk the cross and we do the story of John's Gospel of Jesus, but in the night in which he was betrayed, and then going to the garden and praying, and those disciples can't stay awake, and you're just so mad at them every year. Why the hell can't you stay awake? It's Jesus, and this is the night, right? Why in the hell? Because you're human.
Yeah.
Habitus.
One of the lessons that we read last week, where some of the other disciples were like, yo, Jesus, like, we're fasting, why don't your guys have to fast?
Yeah.
And Jesus was like, because they're with me, we're in the middle, we're in the trenches. You fast in preparation, or you fast in mourning, or you fast to take solemn remembrance. But we are in my 12 bros,
Yeah.
Jesus and the boys, do not fast in this time, because there will be so much time for fasting and mourning once I'm gone, that
That's
in this moment we celebrate and we eat and we share and we break bread together and we form the habit of relationship.
Yeah, and you get strong, right? This is what they're doing. They are eating. This is not a time for fasting. This is not a time for hospital workers to be fasting, even though Lent is a time when we would be fasting. It is an unusual Lent. The battle is on. This is the time when we as a household, we are really catering to your dad. The more we can do to take care of him, the longer he can stay on the front line. I'm cooking and cleaning as I have never done in the last 10 years, because then he doesn't have to think about any of that. We are helping to keep him strong in what he is uniquely called to do, like Joshua. So that's not us being lazy. That's us being on the cliff, doing what we are called to do, so that he in the valley can do what he's called to do, and he can help all the other people. And maybe today he's in the valley, but maybe tomorrow he's holding up the arms of a nurse practitioner, right? Doctors are not better than anybody else. Everybody in the ward has got to hold up everybody else.
Yep.
And I asked Mom, I was like, I saw something online. They were like, I'm not gonna lie, it was a TikTok, and it was someone saying, now is the time for fasting, for praying. And I was like, Mom, should we be in a time where food sensitivity is an issue, and resources are limited, and we are able-bodied people who could bear to reduce and to fast for multiple reasons? She was like, heck no, you guys get grumpy when you fast.
That's right.
Your job is to hold up the arms of your father and to hold my arms up while I take care of your father. And I need you not to be grumpy and not to make his life harder at home. So again, sometimes the best thing to do, in the words of Mom, is to Netflix and chill and be nice to your father. Oh, never mind.
Well, the ways that I also, like, I know in our house we are upholding actively somebody who's on the front lines, and a lot of people don't have that, but I see people actively upholding one another, and by like the youths that I see who have like group chats who are like checking in on each other and hanging out and like having Netflix and or chilling on like having a Netflix party or hanging out or
Yes.
whatever. Like you are holding each other down
Yes.
so that your parents can deal with the stuff that, like, if you take yourself out of the equation by hanging out with all of your friends, then all of those parents can do the next level of
That's
thinking and not be worried about, like, oh my gosh, my kid's all up in my business going crazy, but they can actually be like, how are we going to deal with, maybe there's financial loss, or maybe there's loved ones in our life that are in crisis, or maybe there's on and on and on. And I know that there are young adults, because young adults is like 17 to 35, right? So there are people who are like, I'm missing my senior year, and those are valid griefs.
Valid.
There's so much grief happening that the grief of like massive loss of life across the world is important, and the grief of I didn't get prom, I'm missing senior year, I'm missing my like final year on varsity soccer, like those are also like you can mourn multiple things.
Yeah.
But like holding each other down, or being in your 20s and trying to like, all of my peers who are in medical school and who are like, I'm so close to being able to help, but then I can't help. You being out of the hospital and not having the doctors have to also worry about you and your potential, like, because you don't know enough malpractice or you are whatever, you're causing more injury. You are freeing up energy and you're holding people down, and you're holding up arms by getting out of the way.
That's right.
You're
That's
holding
right.
up arms. And if you have your young kids, by like trying to hold down your kids' lives, you're upholding their futures, and you're upholding your own sanity. And if it's the days when you're like, you go play in our backyard and don't leave our backyard, but also don't come in for 2 hours, you are upholding you and your partner's arms in trying to maintain
Yes, that's exactly
sanity
how it
and
works.
peace.
And I don't know.
So I want to say, just before you jump in, I want to say that the problem of our time is judgment, right? Is judging each other. So it's not for me to judge whether or not you are rising to your highest level of calling.
Yeah.
So when you guys are on your phones helping keep other people in conversation, occupied, growing, animating, thinking, praying, doing whatever you're doing, that's life-saving, because you are upholding the mental well-being of somebody else, and they are upholding the mental well-being of you, and you're both upholding the mental well-being of me, and we are holding each other's arms up as best we can. Right? So this is what it looks like to be heroic in this moment.
It's like a survivor challenge.
That's right. So don't be judging. Don't be judging what other people are doing, or what the Spirit is doing in them, with them. You know, for those medical students, this is a marathon. The moment might come when they are called to the front line in the valley. So their job now is to be as ready as they can be. That's it. You can't ask more of them. As ready as they can be, so that when they are called upon, but it would be horrible to ask of them more now than they're able to give.
Yep.
Right? That would be cruel.
I don't know if we're straying too far from our original topic, or if this is going to be a second video.
Mini-series.
But I know for sure in our household, we've all been struggling with what more can we do? Like the feeling of uselessness, I'm sure something many people are struggling with, as people are unemployed, out of school.
Yeah.
And I know I particularly was struggling with it a little bit, and Mom really assured me that not only are we not to judge one another, but you're not to judge yourself.
Yeah.
Because it is, although you may not see it, or it may not feel like you're doing enough, or it may not feel like you're doing anything to contribute, the things you're doing do matter.
Yeah.
And they could have significance in which you don't have the eyes to see.
That's right.
Preach.
So the thing about your position and being repositioned, right? So a contribution that you guys have made from your seclusion is that you have helped to not get Dad infected from your travel through the airport. Because if you had infected Dad had a COVID positive response, he can't go to the hospital for 14 days. The hospital is now without a staff person for 14 days. So Dad was asked to stay home for 2 days. He worked the phone the whole time he was home. So what was your contribution in those 2 days? Well, you lived pretty much in silence in your isolated room while he was on the phone with patients and hospital administrators and everybody else for 12 hours a day. So you, by not doing, did an enormous contribution. That's a lot, actually. So you may not know it, but if Dad had to interrupt patients 15 times to come out of his room and ask you to stop listening to Netflix, right?
Stop
You
singing.
now are a burden to the system, not a blessing to the system. And we redeployed you to be in relationship with family members that we couldn't emotionally be engaging with. That was important work to do. It was work we needed to do, that somebody was taking care of the family, the wider family, while I was taking care of the congregation. Dad was taking care of the hospital. No judgment.
That was part 2 of the mini-series. Part 3 will be up tomorrow on Friday, so make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss it. In the meantime, leave me a comment. Like, did you learn anything? Did you like something in particular? What really stood out to you about this video? And I will also let you know that this coming weekend is Mother's Day, so not only do I have a specific Mother's Day sermon coming, but also I'm going to be posting an entire Mother's Day service. I hope that you have a lovely week. I hope that you please stay safe, and peace be with you. Until next time.